The 2024 NFL Scouting Combine is now in the books. We got to see this loaded wide receiver class on display. We're going to break down the quarterbacks, running backs, and tight end standout performances, standout, loser performances as well. We're going to break down everything you guys need to know from the 2024 NFL Scouting Combine. With each guy that I talk about, I'm going to pull up their RAS score, talk about their athletic comparisons, some of the comparisons I had for them on film as well. Going to be a fun video. Going to be fun to talk about everything that went down this past weekend. Was awesome to see my boy Xavier Worthy crush the 4.22 that John Ross set 7 years ago and put up a new NFL Combine record. But we will get into everything after the intro. All right, so I'm kind of going to freestyle here. I just have the RAS scores, the comparisons, and I'm just going to kind of go through everything I saw on tape from these guys because pretty much everybody in this video I've already graded. So it's nice to know, at least from my perspective, this is the furthest ahead I've ever been on the NFL Combine. It's nice to have watched all of these guys play without that added context of their athletic testing, because going into these drills, you understand, okay, this guy's fast, he should run fast. This guy's explosive, he should jump high and jump far in the broad jump. And some guys hit expectations, some guys exceeded expectations, and some guys missed expectations. So we are going to start with the wide receiver position. The guy that hit expectations pretty much out of the park was Xavier Worthy. Everybody knew that Xavier Worthy was fast. I thought he was going to run in the 4.2s. As I've talked about before with Xavier Worthy, he ran 4.29 coming out of high school. So I had a legitimate, suspicion that he could actually break John Ross's record, and that's exactly what happened. 4.21 40-yard dash. A lot of people are going to point to, okay, Dree Archer, John Ross, Henry Ruggs, Marquise Goodwin. These are the types of guys that run in the 4.2s. They're never good fantasy football assets. All of those guys never had the production profile and, more importantly, the film of your Xavier Worthy. I really did like Henry Ruggs coming out of school, but obviously, the off-field thing took him out of the NFL, even though he was having a pretty decent second season before that. Xavier Worthy comes in at 165 pounds. That's a problem, but I do think he played a little bit closer to 170. I do think because he's almost 6 feet tall, about 5'11 and a half, he has the ability to add some weight at the NFL level, just like Marquise Brown did, which is a lot of people's comparison for Xavier Worthy. My comparison for Xavier Worthy is actually Jalen Waddle, but Jalen Waddle didn't test at the NFL Combine, so I don't have any scouting stuff that I can go off of with Jalen Waddle. I've heard a lot of people compare Xavier Worthy to Tank Dell, and you can see pretty much blows him out of the water in terms of overall speed. That 40-yard dash time, not even close between those two. But the interesting thing, I think, where the Tank Dell comparison can come in is that 1.50 10-yard split, 1.49 10-yard split for Xavier Worthy. 0 to 10 yards, Tank Dell is just as fast as Xavier Worthy, and I think that's where that comparison comes in. And of course, the size profile is somewhat similar as well. I really like this comparison for Xavier Worthy also. Xavier Worthy to Deshaun Jackson. You can see both of them sub 170 pounds. Deshaun Jackson is a little bit shorter than Xavier Worthy, but both of them are running, 4.35 would have been a good time for Xavier Worthy. The fact that he ran 4.21 is absolutely absurd there. And the 41-inch vertical, 10.11 broad, just an absolutely outstanding day. Big day for the brand as an Xavier Worthy wide receiver 4 truther since pretty much midway through the season. I'm not moving him up. I already had him wide receiver 4. It's not an adjustment for me. What I saw on film was a high-end route runner with elite speed, who's a very tough player, a very smart player, who's still just 20 years old, has so much left on the bone as he can develop. A lot of people are going to look at Xavier Worthy for what he is and not what he can be. The bottom line is we got a guy who broke the FBS as an 18-year-old true freshman in the Power 5, posting the best freshman season we've probably ever seen from a yards per team pass attempt, 1,000-plus yards, 12-plus touchdowns, and he has 4.21 speed. So Xavier Worthy is my wide receiver 4, pretty much locked and loaded right now. A guy that I was also highly in on coming into the NFL Scouting Combine for this particular reason was Ladd McConkey. Everybody looks at the white receiver. He's Cooper Kupp. He's whoever. He's Hunter Renfrow. He's Wes Welker. Ladd McConkey was never like that. If anybody told you he was Cooper Kupp or anybody told you he was Hunter Renfrow, they didn't watch the film. They didn't watch his All-22 in depth, and Ladd McConkey proves why Golden Tate and, some of the other comparisons. I saw Daniel Jeremiah throw up Garrett Wilson's name. Again, we get so put into this box of comparing white receiver versus white receiver. We don't understand the fact that Ladd McConkey had 4.3 speed, had a 1.52 10-yard split, verticals of 36 and 10.4 in the broad. This guy's a freakish athlete for his size, for his play style. He has one of the best agility scores that I thought I was going to see at the combine was from Ladd McConkey, but he didn't actually test the agility drills. I hope we get that at Georgia's Pro Day, because I really think this Ladd McConkey to Golden Tate comparison that I have for Ladd McConkey in our draft guide, which of course is available on flockfantasy.com, link down below in the description. Golden Tate, to me, those two guys separated in short areas and intermediate areas at an elite level. They are route salesmen. They don't show you exactly where they're going to go on their routes. You don't know whether they're running an out, an in, a dig, a double move, whatever. Those two guys have that in common. That's why Ladd McConkey is going to make a great Z receiver at the next level, and he tested very, very well. Now let's get into the guys that are a little bit more height, weight, speed. So Xavier Worthy, Ladd McConkey, those two were my guys, my wide receiver 4 and my wide receiver 6, respectively. Both were there before the combine, and they're there now. The one guy that I did move up my rankings a little bit is Brian Thomas Jr. So with Brian Thomas, he has a 9.97 relative athletic score based on what he did in Indianapolis. My comparison for him was Nico Collins. Nico Collins, also a very good athlete, running a 4.45 at 6'4", 215 pounds, jumping 37.5 inches. Nico Collins is a freak athlete. And the fact that Brian Thomas Jr. is an even better athlete at 6'3", 209 pounds, 4.33 40-yard dash with a 1.50 10-yard split. Again, 0 to 10 yards. 1.50 is pretty much the same as Xavier Worthy. So Brian Thomas being that explosive, that fast off the line of scrimmage is going to be crucial for him at the next level. 38.5-inch vertical, which of course is important for him because he's kind of got that go up and get it, back shoulder fade type of body style and play style. So Brian Thomas Jr. definitely on the rise for me. I'm not, moving Brian Thomas Jr. simply because he was a good athlete. I knew he was a good athlete. I'm moving him up even more because he's an even better athlete than I thought. I thought he was going to go out there, run 4.43, jump, 36 inches, and have a very good day, a 9.45 relative athletic score. This guy's posting top 20 wide receiver numbers of all time since 1987, so I got to move him up a smidge. And I did have that wide receiver 4 through 7 range as a fluid tier, and Thomas goes from wide receiver 7 for me to wide receiver 5 in between Xavier Worthy and Ladd McConkey. And of course, we will do some wide receiver rankings, some running back rankings with this post-combine news coming out, and me and Danny will hop on and dissect this group. So another big winner of the NFL Scouting Combine was another Texas wide receiver in Adonai Mitchell. AD Mitchell comes out even more athletic than Brian Thomas Jr., 9.98 relative athletic score, 6'2", 205 pounds, ran a 4.34 40-yard dash. Again, when I look at some of these combine scores, I have to take into account the fact that I've graded these players already. I know how fast they were on tape. I thought AD Mitchell was going to run in the mid 4.4s, which is a very good time for that size. 4.34 is an absurdly high time. So again, I'm going to go back to the film. I'm going to go back to the drawing board and see if I see evidences of that 4.34 40 in that film. I didn't quite see that kind of speed, but again, that is an impressive number however you slice it. 39.5-inch vert, 11.4 broad. I did absolutely see evidence of that on film. I really wish he would have done the agility drills because it probably would have painted a more complete picture of AD Mitchell. But as you guys can see on the screen there, my comparison for AD Mitchell is George Pickens, mainly due to the fact that they're a similar body type. They win in similar ways, both very good hands, both great in contested and body control type of situations. But like George Pickens, AD Mitchell is a little bit frustrating to watch at times because he doesn't always do the right thing. You could even see that during the combine drills. He runs the gauntlet, he catches 4 passes, stays on the line of scrimmage, and then trips at the end of it. That's just the AD Mitchell experience. So with AD Mitchell, I'm very glad he tested really well, but I am still concerned that he's going to have a little bit more of an inconsistent play style in the NFL. So another one of my dudes, I mean, again, if it sounds like I'm just complimenting all these wide receivers, I'm telling you, it's just an unbelievable class. It's just that good. Xavier Legette, monster performance, doesn't even get really recognized of how good of a performance it was because of what Xavier Worthy did, of Brian Thomas, all these dudes. Xavier Legette goes out there at 6'1", 221 pounds. He runs a 4.39 40-yard dash, which seems like no big deal based on what these other guys did. even though it's extremely impressive. He jumps 40 inches in the vertical and a 10.6 broad. My comp for him on film was DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, 6'3", 228, ran a little bit faster at 4.33, but very similar vertical numbers, very similar broad numbers. Poor agility scores. I actually am curious to see what Xavier Legette's agility drills are if he does them at South Carolina's Pro Day, because for me, I think Xavier Legette is much more fluid athlete for his size than what DK Metcalf was. DK Metcalf, of course, was a little bit stiff. Everybody was nervous about that short shuttle time and that 3-cone time. I really do think that Xavier Legette is one of the most slept-on wide receivers in this class. Everybody, myself included, know that the prospect profile is bad, but I'm telling you, turn on the film, watch what he did against Georgia, against Kamari Lassiter, a potential top 50 corner. Watch what he does against Florida. Watch what he does against Alabama. He knows how to win against SEC caliber competition, NFL caliber competition. So Xavier Legette, great performance at the Combine. That was to be expected. Again, all these guys I'm talking about are winners of the Combine, but for the most part, I expected all of them to test well. They just all happened to exceed my expectations. So another winner from the Combine was Rome Odunze. I really liked, obviously, Rome Odunze. He was my wide receiver 3 before the Combine. He still is my wide receiver 3. Only one of the top 3 guys that actually tested, Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison, opted not to do anything. 6'2", 6'3", 212 pounds. He looked rocked up. He's a huge dude. 39-inch vertical. That's exactly what you see from him on film. Great contested catch rate in 2023. 4.45 40-yard dash. Some people were saying 4.3s. I didn't see that on film, but 4.45 is plenty fast for that size. Again, doesn't seem that good because of what these other guys are doing, but I promise you he plays every bit to that 4.45 on film, and that short shuttle time of 4.03 is extremely good. Very good knowing that he can develop as a route runner at the next level, because I do think that he could become an elite NFL route runner. When you watch him on film, he's already a really good route runner. My comparison for Rome Odunze was kind of like a smaller Mike Evans, and when you look at the numbers stacked up, you kind of see that a little bit. Evans, of course, is taller and a little bit longer, but Rome Odunze and him actually had pretty similar athletic testing. So another winner is the other 2 Washington wide receivers. So if you don't think that Michael Penix is a very good prospect, it's probably because all 3 of his wide receivers are very good. And Jalen McMillan, one of my favorite prospects in the draft right now, I just graded him last week, and what I saw from Jalen McMillan on film was a lot like Jackson Smith and Jigba. And I know JSN has a better on paper prospect profile because he produced alongside Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. And of course, he was a little bit younger. He's an early declare, but the pure film, when you just watch these 2 guys play, Jalen McMillan and JSN look very, very similar. And Jalen McMillan to me is a big winner because I was worried he was going to run 4.55 or 4.57 or something, like even in the 4.6s potentially. And he ran 4.47. That is a great time for him. His agility scores, I thought they would be closer to JSN's. Obviously, JSN's were absolutely elite last year, but I really did think they'd be a little bit better. That 10-yard split of Jalen McMillan's being a lot better than JSN's, though, makes a lot of sense. 1.53 10-yard split. Again, that's pretty similar to what Brian Thomas and Adonai Mitchell and stuff were pulling up. So very good off the line of scrimmage, very good burst. Jalen McMillan is currently my wide receiver 11 in the class, just behind Keon Coleman. He's in a tier with Xavier Legette, with Adonai Mitchell, with potentially Troy Franklin, who I'll talk about in a little bit, who might be moving down a little bit. Jalen McMillan's one of my favorite prospects in this entire class. Similarly, Jalen Polk, his teammate, is also one of my favorite prospects in this class. Again, these guys at Washington were just built different, man. This trio of wide receivers is one of the better ones we've seen over the last decade. Jalen Polk, I had speed question marks about him. He comes out and he runs 4.52. That is a very, very good time for Jalen Polk's size. And this is the closest RAS comparison you guys are going to see. My comparison for Jalen Polk on film was Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice runs a 4.51. He's 6'1", 204 pounds. Jalen Polk, 6'1", 203 pounds. You see the 10-yard split very similar. You see the vertical jump. Rice was a little bit more explosive there, but for the most part, these guys are pretty much neck and neck athletically, and I really, really love that comparison. It is one of my favorite of all of the players I've watched. I think Jalen Polk to Rashee Rice is such a crystal clear projection. I think, like Rashee Rice, this is a solid round 2 wide receiver that we could look at a year from now and be like, how is Jalen Polk not going higher? The answer is because this class is very good, but Jalen Polk, a very solid prospect. Again, we're still going through winners here. This class goes 20, 25 deep of guys that are going to go in the top 75 overall picks, the top 100 overall picks. Maybe we get some early fourth rounders. And another one of my favorite prospects in the draft, currently my wide receiver 13, is Malik Washington of Virginia. Again, late breakout age type of guy. 4.47, he runs in the 40-yard dash, 5'8", 191 pounds. He reminded me a little bit when I was watching Zay Flowers last year. Malik Washington had a couple similar qualities. They're big, rocked up, short dudes, right? 5'8", 191 pounds. That guy's a brick shithouse. He is going to make you feel it when you tackle him. He's very tough, very physical. And like Zay Flowers, I think a lot of these guys can get grouped in as they're just slot receivers. But I do think Malik Washington has some versatility and some upside to play on the outside in the NFL level. And that 10-yard split time, that 40-yard dash time, 42.5-inch vertical jump, absolutely crazy explosiveness from a jumping standpoint. I think Malik Washington has some upside to play on the outside in the NFL, so I really love what he did at the NFL Combine. Final winner of the wide receiver position is Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver from Florida. My comp for him when I was watching him on film was actually Russell Gage. Again, I don't subscribe to the idea that we need to compare white receivers to white receivers. I thought Russell Gage, as a Bucs fan, I've seen Russell Gage a little bit, and of course when he played for the Falcons, he's a very good number 3 receiver, right? When he's healthy, he can contribute as a great number 3 receiver, and that is exactly what I see from Ricky Pearsall. Of course, Ricky Pearsall tested better than Russell Gage, faster, 4.41, more explosive in the jumping, better in the agility drills. So maybe he's like a number 3 projection wide receiver who has number 2 wide receiver upside. Ricky Pearsall is actually getting quite a bit of buzz from the NFL. Daniel Jeremiah has him in his top 50 overall prospects. His grade gets knocked down to about early day 3, late round 3 for me because of the lack of consistent production at Florida. He kind of only had one good year this year, and any other time he wasn't good, but his film admittedly is pretty decent. He looks kind of like a poor man's Ladd McConkey in this class, where he's a good route runner. He can play on the outside potentially, but he's not quite to the level of Ladd McConkey in terms of suddenness. And I think even those agility scores would tell you that he is very sudden, and that just should tell you even more about Ladd McConkey, how good he would have been if he tested his agility scores. So talking about the wide receiver position a little bit further, we're going to just talk about like the guys that are neutral. It was no change, no winner, no loser here. Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors, of course, didn't test, so they're not winners or losers. I think it goes to show you how good this class is that we had this many guys to talk about, and we didn't even have the best 2 guys in the class test. That's how good this wide receiver class is. If you guys rebuilt and you're looking to stack up on wide receivers this year, have fun, because you're going to have a field day drafting wide receivers with your rookie picks. If you got 4 1s and 5 2s or whatever, you're going to walk away with a lot of good wide receiver talent. A guy that I have listed here, this might be a hot take, as neutral, is Keon Coleman, because Keon Coleman ran a 4.61, which is not good. That's not a good time, but if you watch the film on Keon Coleman, which I did before the combine actually happened, you would have known that he did not have elite speed, at least downfield breakaway speed, because his 10-yard split of 1.54 is very solid, man. That's a really good 10-yard split time. 0 to 10 yards is mainly what we're talking about in terms of the wide receiver position anyway. 40-yard bombs, 50-yard bombs, that's not Keon Coleman's game. What he can do, though, is create chunk plays, create explosive plays. And, of course, we know he's very tough. We know he's very physical at the catch point. He has automatic hands. When he was running the gauntlet drill, when they're all throwing the passes over the middle, Keon Coleman stayed on the line. He moved as fast as anybody else in terms of mile per hour GPS tracking data because he trusts his hands. He wasn't thinking. He was just running the gauntlet full speed, no problem. And Keon Coleman is somebody that everybody likes to say negative things about, but I still like Keon Coleman. I have him wide receiver 10, so it's not like I have the guy, wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4 or something like that. But wide receiver 10 in this class is still a player that I would spend a top 50 NFL draft pick on because this class is that good. So my comp for him on film was like a slower version of Braylon Edwards. And of course, old school football players will know that Braylon Edwards was an unbelievable prospect. So I'm not saying that Keon Coleman had the production profile of Braylon Edwards coming out of Michigan, because notoriously he was like the 2nd pick in the draft. But I do think Keon Coleman, in terms of play style comparison, is a slower version of Braylon Edwards, because what I remember of Braylon Edwards as a young kid was Braylon Edwards going up and getting it all the time. He was the type of dude that could win at the catch point, and that's what I think Keon Coleman does the best. He's tough, he's physical, he's still just 20 years old as well. A lot of meat left on the bone for him to develop his route running game. for him to develop as a more complete pass catcher. Another guy that was kind of neutral for me was Tez Walker. I knew Tez Walker was fast, so that didn't really shock me. 4.36. Again, maybe I could consider him a winner because of how fast he was, but the reason I put him as neutral here is because he weighed in at 6'1", 193 pounds when he was listed at 6'3" and 200 pounds. So he came in a little bit smaller. He still ran fast. I knew he was going to be fast. So for me, not a huge takeaway here from Tez Walker. That 40.5-inch vert is awesome. That 11.2 broad is awesome. But again, this was kind of expected. My comp for him is Alec Pierce because I think both guys are destined to be probably Indianapolis Colts and also guys that are on the outside running downfield routes, not getting a whole lot of targets, which is why I'm not a huge Tez Walker guy for fantasy because I don't think his role is conducive to a lot of fantasy production. Another guy that I think had a neutral performance here at the Combine was Roman Wilson. Comes in, 5'10.5", 185 pounds. My comp for him actually is Marvin Mims. And I think the test that he ended up doing, he tested very similar to Marvin Mims. 4.39 in the 40, 4.38 for Marvin Mims. The 10-yard split, very similar. I think had he done the vertical, had he done the shuttle and the 3-cone, Roman Wilson and Marvin Mims would have came out very, very similarly. I've seen people get really excited about Roman Wilson, call him Tyler Lockett, call him, whatever. But this archetype of wide receiver, these like vertical slot wide receivers, they're very scheme specific. We haven't seen Josh Downs, Elijah Moore, these type of dudes, Rondale Moore, hit at a high rate in the NFL. And Roman Wilson kind of strikes me as that caliber of prospect, only maybe even a touch below, because Marvin Mims notoriously had a better prospect profile than Roman Wilson. Elijah Moore had a better prospect profile than Roman Wilson. Rondale Moore, better prospect profile than Roman Wilson. But Roman Wilson, what he does do well is he works better downfield than a lot of those guys. So maybe that'll give him a good role in the NFL. Again, another neutral showing we had from Jacob Cowing, wide receiver of Arizona. Hopefully you guys can see all the schools and that kind of thing, and I'm not confusing anybody here. Jacob Cowing, I kind of knew he was fast, but one thing that I did give him points for is he was listed 157 at the Senior Bowl, comes in at 168. Still a small receiver, of course, 5'8", 168. We're talking Tank Dell size, but at the same time, he was listed 157 after the Senior Bowl, so he did weigh in a little bit better, and he still ran 4.38, jumped well, had a pretty good agility score as well. My comp for him on film was kind of a worse athlete version of Rondale Moore, and that kind of bears out in the numbers there. Rondale Moore tested really well, and Jacob Cowing, I think, has a little bit better market share production than what Rondale Moore had coming out of Purdue. So again, this is going to be a little bit of a longer video. I apologize for that. There is timestamps everywhere because I am going to get to the running back and the tight end and quarterback positions as well. The final guy that I need to talk about at wide receiver, though, is the only loser of the entire video, and that's Troy Franklin, wide receiver from Oregon. The reason he's a loser in this video is because Troy Franklin, to me, had, the potential to really rise his draft stock in the eyes of the NFL. Troy Franklin goes out there, 8.17 RAS score isn't bad, but Troy Franklin's assumption was that, especially considering how all these other guys tested, he'd have a 9.5 plus relative athletic score. He comes in 6'1", 176. He was listed in some places 6'3", 187 pounds. I didn't think he was that big. I thought this is about more accurate. 6'2", 176 pounds is what he came in at. That's what I thought he was playing at. 39-inch vertical jump is definitely good. 10.4 broad is definitely good. 4.41 40-yard dash, definitely solid. I thought he was going to run a little bit faster than that, but I'm not really too concerned. The problem I think I have here with Troy Franklin is that he came in a little bit lighter, ran a little bit slower, didn't really look that great in the field drills, and he also had a pretty poor short shuttle time, which is kind of a concern of mine where, on film, I see moments of him being able to develop into a better route runner than he currently is, but I worry a little bit because he has some ball tracking issues, and the fact that, he didn't really test well agility-wise concerns me that he might just be Jamison Williams all over again because, Jamison Williams had a pretty good prospect profile, was a fast guy, great production in a great offense, and that's kind of what Troy Franklin is looking like right now. So I did actually move Troy Franklin down a little bit. I had him wide receiver 5 before this. He's going to be about in that wide receiver 7 or wide receiver 8 range, along with, Adonai Mitchell and Lad McConkey and those guys. That's kind of the range that Troy Franklin's going to fit in. My tier going into this combine was 4, Xavier Worthy, Franklin 5, Ladd at 6 and Brian Thomas at 7, and I kind of swapped Brian Thomas and Troy Franklin. So that's kind of where I'm at with Troy Franklin. Got to down tick him a little bit. I'm definitely going to go back to the film and make sure I know what I'm saying here, but I do think this was a disappointing showing, relatively speaking, from Troy Franklin. And then a couple other guys, Jamari Thrash from Louisville, Isaiah Williams from Illinois, both kind of losers as well, but they weren't really highly thought of prospects. They might actually be in jeopardy of going undrafted at this point in time because of what they did at the combine. But I mean, this class is so deep, they still might get drafted in the 6th or the 7th round and be worth a dart throw. Now let's move on to the running back position. Of course, this will take a lot less time because there's a lot less guys to talk about. The biggest winner is Issac Guerendo. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm just going to assume that's how it is. Running back from Louisville who posted the second best RAS score of all time for a running back. And running back, for what it's worth, too, is more predictive to be a great athlete than it is at wide receiver. I probably should have said that at the top of the video, but wide receiver athletic testing, depending on what you do well, is what you need to test well at. So Adonai Mitchell being fast and good jumping, he needs to test well as a speed receiver who can jump. But for the most part, athletic testing on an even playing field is not really that predictive at wide receiver. But at running back, things like weight-adjusted speed score and your agility scores and your size, that stuff is actually predictive. So Issac Guerendo coming in at 6 foot, 221 and running 4.33, the fastest time among running backs. We're talking about a guy who is on par with Saquon Barkley in terms of a weight-adjusted speed score. So, again, he's obviously not the prospect that Saquon was. He was an absolute freak of nature. But athletically speaking, we're talking about a guy that was on par with Saquon Barkley. So I am going to go back and watch Issac Guerendo. I had not watched him to this point, so I don't love that. I don't love that I'm now watching him with the context of how great of an athlete he is, because he might not play that good of an athlete, but at the same time, that's an unbelievable score, and it's hopefully going to help his NFL draft capital. Me and Danny were talking about this when it happened. We were like, is Issac Guerendo just Isaiah Pacheco all over again? Because that might be the type of guy that he ends up becoming in the NFL. Late day 3 pick, or mid day 3, or maybe even early day 3 pick, and ends up starting for an NFL team for a couple of years on his rookie contract like Pacheco is right now. Biggest winners, I think, among the top running backs coming into the combine, Jonathan Brooks, Jalen Wright, and Trey Benson. Those were my top 3 running backs, and they were kind of jockeying for that first spot because I thought any one of them could get it. With Jonathan Brooks, of course, had he not got injured, he'd probably be my clear RB1, and he actually weighed in a little bit heavier than we thought he was going to at 216 pounds, but I'm not putting too much stock into it. I think he played closer to like 207, 208. Jalen Wright was a guy that I knew was going to test well. People seem surprised by this. Jalen Wright was on Bruce Feldman's freaks list coming into the season, and Jalen Wright, 5'10", 210 pounds, 4.38 40-yard dash, 1.55 10-yard split, 38-inch vertical, 11.2 broad jump. That is a 97th percentile number. Jalen Wright, unbelievable combine so far. Absolutely love to see that from him. He is on the rise definitely for NFL teams, because the concern for me with Jalen Wright was, was he going to test at the level that I thought he was going to? And then also, is the NFL going to care? Are they going to look at him because he's a super young running back, very good through contact, very elusive? But if the NFL doesn't like him and he's a 5th-round draft pick, then he's nothing more than a dart throw. Now, I think he actually could be like a 2nd or a 3rd-round pick. My comp for him was Tony Pollard. Of course, he's much more athletic than Tony Pollard. He actually rivals a guy like Miles Sanders, as you guys can see, in terms of athleticism. And I actually think, too, it's a decent play style comparison, because both of these guys coming out of school didn't really know what they're doing. And I think Jalen Wright's kind of in that camp, but at least he's very young. He can get better. Trey Benson, the other guy that was in, jockeying for that RB1 overall spot with Jonathan Brooks not testing because of the ACL tear. My comp for him on film was Zach Charbonnet, but I thought Zach Charbonnet with breakaway speed, which is pretty much exactly how he tested. 6 foot, 216 pounds, basically the exact same size as Charbonnet. 4.39 versus 4.53. And then the 10-yard split is actually very similar, because Charbonnet is very good quick acceleration. He just doesn't have good long speed. And then his vertical was actually a little bit higher, but the broad jump's exactly the same. I think Benson would have tested a lot better agility-wise. He didn't end up doing the agility drills. But regardless, I think Trey Benson also, like Jalen Wright, has a legitimate chance to come off the board on round 2, round 3 of the NFL draft and be in contention for RB1 in this class, because between those 3 running backs, it's really going to come down to who gets drafted first, which running back landing spot is the best. Does Benson go to the Chargers? Does Jalen Wright go to the Cowboys? Does, one of these guys go to the Texans? Like, whoever goes to the best landing spot and has the best draft capital is probably going to be RB1. Trey Benson actually compares very favorably to Tulane running back Matt Forte, who you may have heard of if you played fantasy before, and that I thought was pretty interesting. But Definitely a lot of good news so far at the running back position. Tyrone Tracy from Purdue, bit of a sleeper guy. He tested very well, 5'11", 209 pounds, 4.48, very explosive, 240-inch vert, 10.4 broad, 4.06 on the short shuttle. So this guy is an athletic darling. I'm definitely going to go watch him. I'd never even really heard of the guy, so I'm going to go back and watch him. He compares very favorably to Chris Evans, the Bengals running back, formerly of Michigan. So that one's an interesting comp. And then final kind of guys that I want to talk about here, Marshawn Lloyd, I would say, had a bit of a neutral combine. I knew he was a good athlete, so 5'8", 220 pounds. That's a little bit bigger, actually, than I thought he was, so that's great that he got up to 220. Still runs in the 4.4s, 4.46, 25 reps on the bench. He's a very strong dude as well. That doesn't shock me one bit. And then 1.55 on the 10-yard split is very good. My comp for him on film was Khalil Herbert, and he's actually a much better athlete than Khalil Herbert, so that's great. He compares a little bit more towards DeAndre Swift, which is what Daniel Jeremiah said on the NFL Network broadcast, which I thought was a decent comparison for him as well. You can see about the same height, a little bit thicker, about the same speed as well. Blake Corum also, I thought, had like a neutral combine. He comes in at like 5'8", 205. That's exactly what I thought he was in terms of height and weight. Does rip 27 reps on the bench press, which is pretty solid. And then he runs 4.53. I thought he was really in danger of running in the 4.6s. So the fact that he ran low 4.5s is pretty solid for him. He compared pretty favorably for me on film to Chuba Hubbard because I think their production profiles are pretty similar. Even though Chuba Hubbard's a lot taller and a little bit bigger than Blake Corum, I think they do the same things well. And of course, we had that big season where Chuba Hubbard should have came out of school and then dealt with an injury-riddled season after that. And that's kind of the same path that Blake Corum has followed in his collegiate career. So going over some of the losers at the running back position, we have Bucky Irving of Oregon. He did not have a great combine, 5'9", 192 pounds, small running back, comes in, he runs a 4.55. I thought he was going to run the 4.3s, like no exaggeration. I thought that's what he was going to run. He looked faster on film, did not run that fast at the combine, and his jumps were absolutely putrid. So, not loving it for Bucky Irving so far. My comp for him was Tajay Spears, who clearly was a much better athlete than Bucky Irving. Danny's comp for him is Kenneth Gainwell, who's a little bit more in line athletically with Bucky Irving. I think regardless, we're talking about a day 3 running back. I wouldn't get your hopes up that he's going to turn into freaking Aaron Jones or something like that. He's probably going to end up being Kenneth Gainwell, or best case scenario, he's James Cook or Tajay Spears. So I would say Bucky Irving stock down for sure. Another big guy, and this one hurts because I really like this dude, Audric Estime, comes out and runs a 4.71. The rest of his athletic testing was great. 5'11", 221, 23 strong on the bench press. He's obviously a very strong back. 38 vertical, 10.05 broad jump, 158 10-yard split is actually like a 71st percentile number at running back. So again, Audric Estime does not have breakaway speed. It's very clear at 4.71 he does not have breakaway speed, but he does have pretty good 0 to 10-yard speed. And I still like him. I still think he's a good running back, and he's going to be a good running back in the NFL. He compared very favorably to David Montgomery for me when I was watching his film and actually grading him, and he still is my RB4 in the class because the reality is there isn't a lot of good running backs in this class anyway, so if Audric Estime was in a loaded running back class, he would tumble down in the rankings, but he's still the RB4 in the class for me. I did lower his grade a smidge, but he does compare favorably to David Montgomery, who, of course, also does not have breakaway speed, 4.63 in the 40-yard dash, and a pretty similar 10-yard split, actually an even worse 10-yard split as well. So with Audric Estime, he's going to get you chunk runs, but he's not breaking off 50-yard touchdowns. I'm concerned a little bit about his draft capital. I think that the NFL might let him fall to day 3 now, which is unfortunate. I thought he could have went in the 2nd or the 3rd round with a good time if he had run 4.52 or something. I think that would have been a great time for him, and he might have gone in the 2nd or the 3rd round. Now it's more likely he's a 3rd round hopeful and probably more likely a 4th or a 5th round pick, but I will still be taking shots in rookie drafts because I liked what I saw from him at Notre Dame. Quickly, let's breeze through the tight end position. Brock Bowers is a winner for me. Maybe that's an unpopular take, but all he had to do was go in and weigh in above 228 or whatever people said he was going to weigh in at. 243 is what he comes in at. He doesn't have to test, man, honestly. He's that good of a player. I don't think he has to test at all. Maybe he's going to test at Georgia's Pro Day, but to me, he's a winner because he weighed 243. Theo Johnson and Ben Sinnott. So Theo Johnson of Penn State, Ben Sinnott of Kansas State. These two guys were the most athletic tight ends at the combine that tested. And also, too, I would say their production profiles are somewhat decent. They're not like, this is a bad tight end class. Don't get it twisted. After Brock Bowers and Jatavian Sanders, there is no real good tight ends to speak of. But Theo Johnson and Ben Sinnott were kind of in that next group, jockeying for tight end 3. And Theo Johnson comes out here and basically has one of the best combine performances from a tight end at 6'6", 260, runs a 4.57. Unbelievable vertical jump for that size as well. So he's going to be interesting. Maybe that gets him drafted in the second or the third round. Definitely going to make sure to watch him. I had not graded him coming into the combine. And same goes for Ben Sinnott. He comes in 6'3.5", 250, and ends up running a 4.68 with a 40-inch vert and very good agility drills too. And I just threw up Jimmy Graham and Sam Laporta because they were comparable guys that, of course, you'd be familiar with from a fantasy perspective. So just an interesting look there. And then the big loser at the tight end position was the aforementioned Jatavian Sanders, tight end from Texas. Did not test like Noah Fant, and that's what my comp for him was, and I thought he would test like a guy like Noah Fant. He would come out running the 4.5s. He would run, a very, very, like his 10-yard split is very good, right? That's a 93rd percentile number, right on par with Noah Fant, but the long speed definitely suffers a little bit there, and he didn't do the vert, which I thought he would test very well at. Had he done the vert, I think his RAS score would have been higher, but for the most part, a disappointing performance out of Jatavian Sanders. So I know that was a lot. I probably talked too fast. Inevitably, somebody's going to comment that down below. Apologize for that. But again, if you guys did enjoy this video, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. If you want all of the rookie content you could possibly want, that will be available in the Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide, the Dynasty Wall Street Journal. 30 prospects live right now with write-ups. We will be doing an update to the Wall Street Journal with 20 more prospects for a total of 50. We're going to rank them all, write them all up, player cards, player comparisons, grades, all that stuff. And we'll add in all the combine numbers, all the updates that we made after the combine. That will be coming out about 2 weeks from now on March 15th. So if you guys are interested in the Dynasty Wall Street Journal, there's going to be a big time update coming in about 2 weeks from now. That is definitely something you're going to want to check out. And of course, check out all the other content on flockfantasy.com as well. Great stuff going on over there. Superflex rankings, one quarterback, prospects, Dynasty trade calculator that's customized to your league settings, Dynasty decisions episodes going fast and furious. You get first priority submissions when you use the promo code FSE. And when you use the promo code FSE, you get 7 days for free, a 30% off discount code, as well as 6 months for free when you sign up annually as well. So if that interests you, check it out down below in the pinned comment and in the description. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.